Okay, so you're here because, well, you want to get the important stuff about AI, right? Without getting totally bogged down in
Yeah.
like the super technical jargon.
Exactly. You want the core
The
ideas.
things that actually matter for how you think about AI, how you might use it. And that's what we're doing today. We're
Mhm.
taking a deep dive into something called the Model Context Protocol, MCP.
Right, MCP.
And we're going to unpack why the thinking behind it could really fundamentally change how AI works for you.
That's the goal. We've looked at the concepts, the ideas floating around it to give you a clear picture and, yeah, why it might just create a much more connected AI experience, more useful, really.
Okay, so let's get into it. There's a pretty helpful starting point in the material we looked at, thinking of MCP like USB-C for AI.
Ah, okay. The connector analogy.
Yeah. You know how USB-C standardize how all your different gadgets connect?
Right, one cable, mostly.
Well, MCP is sort of aiming for that same thing, but for AI applications, things like, say, Claude Desktop or coding tools,
IDs, yeah.
how they can connect to all sorts of different data sources and other tools or capabilities.
So it's bridging the gap.
Essentially, yeah. It's trying to break down the walls between different AI tools and your data, unlock, a new level of integrated intelligence.
So instead of everything being its own separate thing.
Exactly. There's this common language, this protocol for them to talk to each other.
And what's really interesting, as the material points out, is the need it's addressing.
Hmm.
Because LLMs, large language models, they're powerful, sure.
Definitely.
But to do complex stuff, they often need outside info
Yeah.
or special skills, right?
Right. They can't know everything or do everything on their own.
Precisely. So MCP offers a structured way for them to, tap into that, whether it's files on your computer or maybe a database.
Or connecting out to the internet.
Yeah, or connecting to services online. And this happens through these things called MCP servers. They're like the intermediaries.
The middle.
Kind of, yeah. And that intermediary layer is really key for the flexibility, the standardization.
Hmm.
That's what makes MCP seem so, well, promising.
Right. And it's not just like connecting A to B. It's about really changing how we use AI, making different bits work together without you even noticing, hopefully.
Seamlessly, yeah.
Our sources talk about MCP being potentially the foundation for a whole new AI ecosystem, almost like the first wave of apps for AI.
Interesting comparison.
Now, they're careful to say it's not exactly like the app stores we know now.
Because AI is different.
Right, because AI's real power is its flexibility with, just text,
Yeah.
natural language.
Yeah.
And that opens up some really different ways these connections could work.
Yeah, if you connect that to the bigger picture, like the material suggests, it's really about getting past these isolated AI apps.
The silos?
Exactly. AI's flexibility, using text like that, it allows for much more fluid ways for tools and data to interact. And this chaining ability, it isn't just neat.
It unlocks new things.
It lets AI tackle complex tasks
Yeah.
that before, well, you'd have to do it manually, switching between different apps and copying info across.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics a bit. How does it actually work? The core architecture, it's a client-server model,
It is, yeah. So you have MCP hosts.
which are the apps like Claude Desktop or my code editor that want the information or the tool.
Right, they're hosting the interaction, you can say. Claude Desktop is the device in that USB-C analogy.
Got it.
Then you have MCP clients. They maintain a direct, like, one-to-one link with the servers.
Okay.
And the MCP servers themselves, they're often these fairly lightweight programs.
Yeah.
Their job is just to expose some specific function or data through this standard protocol.
So the server is the bit that actually does something or holds the data.
Exactly. They're the bridge to the actual stuff. They might access local things like your files, your documents, maybe databases.
On our own machine.
Yeah. Or they can connect out to remote services, things on the internet, using APIs usually.
API is the standard ways computer systems talk to each other.
Right. And it's this separation, the app wanting something, the host, and the thing providing it, the server, that makes it so versatile.
And what seems really powerful, based on our sources, is this idea of open standards and how extensible it could be.
The hope is big players adopt it.
Yeah, like OpenAI, Anthropic. Imagine if they all supported MCP.
That would be huge.
And for anyone listening who's interested in efficiency, the benefit for developers seems pretty clear.
Oh, definitely.
They build their tool or connection once as an MCP server.
Right. Write the server code once.
And bam, suddenly it's usable by potentially lots of different host apps, Claude, maybe Gemini, whatever comes next.
Which means much better interoperability,
Yep.
potentially, and just access to way more tools for everyone using those hosts.
Yeah.
And this brings up, efficiency from the developer side, like the text mentions. Instead of building custom integrations for every single AI platform, which is a huge pain,
I can imagine.
they could just focus on making a really good MCP server for their specific thing. It saves time, sure, but it also encourages more innovation, maybe, because these servers can then be mixed and matched in cool ways.
Which leads us right into what the sources call the power of integration and chaining.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
This is where you see how it might actually change how you use AI day to day. The material contrasts, traditional apps where you're stuck inside one program
Working in that one environment.
with the MCP way, where a host app like Claude could take the output from one MCP server and just feed it straight into another one.
Or combine results from several servers.
To do something much more complicated.
This chaining is, it's a fundamental shift, potentially. Think about that fine dinner example they described.
Right. In Slack.
Someone says, let's get dinner in a Slack channel. An MCP host listening in could then say, ping a Google Maps server and a Yelp server for nearby places. Then maybe hit a memory MCP server, we'll come back to that, to check everyone's food preferences from past chats.
Whoa.
And then maybe even use an open table server to actually book a table.
No way.
And finally post a summary like, booked a table for Florida Pizza Place, 7 p.m., back into Slack.
Okay, that's the aha moment. That really shows the practical side. Instead of me opening Maps, then Yelp, remembering who hates onions, then open table.
Right. The AI, using MCP, orchestrates the whole thing.
That's impressive. And you mentioned the memory MCP server. Using a knowledge graph, why is that a big deal for how AI understands stuff?
Yeah, the knowledge graph part is interesting. Think of it as a more flexible way for the AI through MCP to get it information like your personal interests. More flexible than, say, a super rigid database.
Less structured.
Exactly. As the text explains it, unlike traditional databases with strict tables and columns, a knowledge graph maps information as like interconnected things and relationships between them.
More like a web.
Kinda, yeah. And that structure lines up much better with how LMs actually process information. So it makes it easier for them to work with fuzzier stuff, like personal preferences or notes you've taken.
Okay. Now, the sources also brought up this idea, a mesh of agents. Sounds a bit sci-fi.
Hey, it does a bit. But it's an intriguing idea they explore, where one thing, one entity, can be both an MCP host and an MCP server.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, the example was Claude Code. It might use an MCP server, like one for GitHub, to get code.
Acting as a host.
Right. But it could also offer its coding help as an MCP server to another application, maybe like the main Claude desktop app.
Ah, so it's both consuming and providing services through MCP.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the implication is you could end up with this network of AI agents making requests to each other, fulfilling requests, a real mesh of intelligence.
Interesting. Okay, but listening to this, someone might be thinking, hang on, isn't this just tools, APIs, stuff developers already use?
That's a fair question.
And the source material does tackle that potential confusion.
It does, yeah. And it acknowledges there's definitely overlap. MCP involves tools, accessing resources like files or URLs, prompts are involved.
So it uses similar building blocks.
For sure. But the key difference, they argue, is who it's for and how dynamic it is for the user.
Yeah.
Traditional developer tools, APIs, they're often built for quite specific technical jobs, right?
Yeah, usually need some coding knowledge to use them properly.
Whereas MCP is aiming to be more user-centric. The idea is that individual users, maybe without being programmers, could potentially add or remove MCP servers themselves.
Customizing their AI setup.
In a much more flexible way. Today, I want my AI to talk to my calendar. Tomorrow, maybe my fitness tracker.
And the user example they gave really helped me grasp this. The daily news bulletin system, built with that memory server and Claude desktop.
Yeah, that's a great practical illustration.
Can you walk us through that again? How does it show the power for, like, an everyday person?
Right. So this user essentially taught their AI what topics they cared about by storing interests in the memory server's knowledge graph.
Okay, like AI research, local politics, favorite sports team.
Stuff like that. Then they just asked Claude Desktop, the host, to get the latest news on those topics, probably using a web search server behind the scenes.
And it pulls together a personalized briefing.
Exactly. Yeah. But the clever part, highlighted in the text, was telling the system to remember what news it already showed you.
Ah, so no repeats.
Right. It checks the memory server first
Yeah.
to avoid telling you the same story again. And then the user was thinking, okay, next, I could easily add connections to Google Tasks, maybe my calendar, share summaries via email,
All just by asking the AI within Claude Desktop.
all within that same natural language chat interface.
And the really key point there, which the source hits hard, is comparing that to building a whole separate app to do it.
Oh yeah, that'd be way harder.
You'd need serious coding skills, figure out databases for preferences, integrate with news APIs, task managers. It's a big project.
A massive undertaking. Whereas MCP let the user get that personalized function inside an existing app just using plain English.
That really shows the potential ease of use. Much lower barrier.
It really does. Makes these integrated AI things feel much more achievable for, well, anyone.
Which brings us to the bigger picture, the implications for people listening, especially if you work with AI.
Right. MCP raises some big questions.
Should you be thinking about, say, making your system's features available as an MCP server so other AIs could use them?
Or could MCP be a new way for your users to interact with your AI? Maybe even replacing some traditional UIs.
Could you turn your existing app into an MCP host to tap into all these other servers?
Or should you build your next application as an MCP host from the ground up? Lots to consider.
And they mentioned ongoing open source work, like on Islamic AI assistants. That shows the potential for really diverse uses.
Definitely. But it's also important to remember, and the material is clear on this, MCP is still pretty early days.
It's not all smooth sailing yet.
Not at all. There are definitely challenges, hurdles.
What are the main ones people should know about right now?
Well, setup, installation. It can still be a bit fiddly. You might be editing config files, JSON files, running things using Docker or Node. It's not quite consumer-ready plug-and-play yet.
More for the technically inclined at the moment.
Generally, yeah. Authentication logging into different services can also be tricky. Sometimes you're juggling developer API keys, figuring out permissions.
Not super user-friendly.
Not always. And security is still a developing area. Things like prompt injection, make sure data stays private. Basic security is there, but it's evolving.
Plus the host's asking for permission all the time.
Yeah, right now the host often needs to constantly ask, is it okay if I use the calendar server now? Which can get annoying.
Okay. And looking forward, what's the next big step the sources mention? Dynamic discovery.
Yeah, that seems key. The ability for the LLM, the AI itself, to automatically figure out which MCP servers are available and which ones it needs for a task.
Without me having to tell it, use the map server or use the Yelp server.
Exactly. It just knows what tools it has access to and can use them autonomously. That would be a huge leap in usability.
Really make it feel more intuitive, more intelligent.
Definitely. It would really boost the autonomy and flexibility. Imagine asking a complex question and the AI just figures out, okay, I need to check the database server, then the web search server, then maybe the calculation server all by itself.
That would be a truly seamless experience.
That's the vision, I think.
So wrapping this up, despite the current, complexities and rough edges,
It's still early.
the Model Context Protocol, MCP, it really does feel like a potentially significant step, a move towards a more open, more connected AI world.
Yeah, the core idea is powerful.
This ability to extend what an AI host can do by plugging in these specialized servers, chaining them together, it just opens up so many possibilities for new applications, incredible flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes you really think about how quickly this stuff could impact different fields.
For sure. Even with the technical stuff underneath, the main point, as our sources suggest, is making AI more accessible, more interoperable.
And just more useful day to day.
Well, ultimately, yeah.
Yeah.
More useful in your work and your life.
So as everyone listening thinks about this deep dive, maybe here's a final thought to chew on. How might these kinds of standardized protocols like MCP not just change how you interact with AI, but maybe fundamentally reshape what software is, how applications are built, how data gets shared in the future?
That's a big question. The long-term implications.
Definitely something worth keeping an eye on, exploring further.